Hey everyone, you're watching Ash on Comics. My name is Ash, and this is my Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse review. I saw this a few days ago. I've been meaning to do a review on it. I've been caught up on other things. So yeah, I'm going to start off by saying this is a recommend. This is a good film. If I had to say one thing about it to describe this film, is at a risk of being punny, this film is spectacular in every sense of what the word spectacular means. It's a visual feast for the eyes. The sound design is amazing. The audio cues mesh perfectly with the visual stylings. It is a comic book on the screen. It is an animated comic book. It is something not to be missed if you are a comic book fan at all, even if Spider-Man is not your favorite character. That said, while this may be a spectacular Spider-Man film, it is not an amazing Spider-Man film. See what I did there? There's problems with it, and I know I'm probably going to get some backlash regarding this this opinion, because everyone seems to love this film. I hear people online and comments and things talking about how this is like the best Spider-Man movie ever. In fact, when in the theater while I was sitting through the credits, there's a group of guys behind me were echoing similar thoughts, just talking about like, oh, this is probably the best Spider-Man movie ever made. And I was just like, wow. I don't agree with that. I don't know if it might be. I could see maybe it being the third best, because it's not like there's a lot of great Spider-Man movies. But Sam Raimi nailed Spider-Man in Spider-Man 1 and 2. I think Spider-Man 2, just for your own frame of reference here, where I'm coming from, Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man movie ever made. This movie has some of the same problems for me that Spider-Man Homecoming has. And that this is a Spider-Man made for the millennial generation. This is a Spider-Man that is targeting the same audience that the current Marvel comics are targeting. This is a Spider-Man that, while not being written in an SJW sense, the way if you follow comics right now with Comicsgate and the complaints that are going on with the film, with the comics, and not just Spider-Man, comics in general, being mishandled or mistreated, and having political propaganda put into the books. Things like, Peter Parker walking around with "Ask me about my feminist agenda" was one of the big highlights of, highlight examples of these type of things. This film isn't necessarily egregious in the sense that it's doing those things. You don't see Peter Parker doing that, but you do get the modern versions of these characters. So that means, of course, Peter Parker is a deadbeat loser, and he's just not a hero. I can understand a character being down on his luck, and I'd be okay with that. But the Peter Parker we get in this, that's a mentor to Miles Morales, the main character of the movie. Make no mistake, this is a Miles Morales movie. They try to camouflage the whole thing with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and they do a clever concept of having these different universes. So all these spider characters, and forewarning, I want to avoid spoiling because I want you to see this film if you haven't. I'm sure most everyone listening to this has seen it, but if you're one of the few that haven't, I don't want to spoil the film, but I am going to spoil some things because I need to cover. So just at a risk, if you're one of those people that's like, no, I can't. I figured those type of people would be the people who've already seen the film, but fair warning. They do a clever thing in making all these spider characters from their own spider, their own multiverse. I mean, there's even an anime character in it. So the film is clearly trying to say, like, hey, in these different universes of reality is different, things are just different. I mean, there's a Spider-Ham is in it. So they're basically saying, look, cartoons, there's a cartoon universe. So instead of just having it like in the comics where there's Spider-Gwen and doesn't make any sense, she's from a world where she got bit, not Peter Parker. And I guess I might be messing things up in the comics since I don't really follow Marvel Comics. I'd be making some presumptions that I shouldn't be. But regardless, in the comic books, all these characters exist in the current Marvel continuity. And in this movie, they don't. I guess if I would have to describe, this film is the Spider-Man Ultimate Universe. This is Miles Morales' world. And because of that, there is a Spider-Man in that world, just like in the Ultimate. And just like in the Ultimates, that Spider-Man dies, Miles Morales is going to take up the throne. Or, not the throne, that's so silly. Take up the mantle. But then we get another Peter Parker from presumably what we would call the regular Marvel Universe. They don't make any reference to say that this is, some other strange. It's the Peter Parker he's broken up with Mary Jane. It's all the things that fit what we know in the comics. And this guy's a loser. And he's not just down on his luck, which I could be okay with. Hey, the chips are down, you've been broken, whatever. Like, I get it. Like, but he's fundamentally not Peter Parker. There's even a line in the film where Miles is trying to, like, go, because the Peter Parker that's... And here's the thing, man. I'm sorry that I'm always go off on tangents. This is for me an exercise in stream of conscience. And I didn't want to write anything down. I just wanted to be able to practice getting my thoughts out and doing it in an off-the-cuff manner. And I know that might drive some people nuts and what have you, but think of this as like a conversation. The concept here is that you and I sitting down after we saw the film and we're talking about it, and when you do that, you're not writing a movie review, you're just being conversational. But anyways, so there's Peter Parker in the Miles universe who ends up dying. Now, that Peter Parker was the Peter Parker that I'm going to say we, referencing people that identify or support the same ideals of Comicsgate, the classic comic book superheroes that don't propagandize things, and they're actually heroic. That Peter Parker is in the film, and the film kills him. Then they deliver us another Peter Parker, and it's one of those things that I'm like, is this intentional? Was this like a metaphor, like for them to show, like, look, we killed Peter Parker. We're giving you now the bad one. And it's like, I couldn't help but think that. And as I was watching the film, I was like, this is the filmmakers telling us, giving us a metaphor for what literally happened in the comic books with the SJW agenda and coming in and replacing and destroying our, beloved characters. So there's a line where Miles, who's looking to this other Peter Parker, to be a mentor, because he doesn't know what to do. He's got these powers, but he doesn't know what to do with them. And this Peter Parker's like, whatever, I'm out of here. I don't care about helping people. He's just a jerk. And Miles delivers his line to him. He starts to say, what about with great power comes, and Peter literally turns to him and says, "Don't you finish that line. Don't you?" Like, I'm just like, what? What happened to That's one of the most essential things about Peter Parker and Spider-Man is with great power comes great responsibility. That's his driving force. And this Peter Parker just doesn't care. Just wants to go back to eating cold pizza, I guess, and living in a, I don't know what. He lives in a hovel. Like, it's so sad and pathetic, and you're just like, I don't want to like judge, but it's like, that's not what these characters exist for. These characters exist to be idealized and something to look up to. And they just destroyed Peter Parker in my eyes. Now Miles is able to bring him around a little bit in the movie and make him kind of be like Spider-Man again. But he's never really 100%. It's like he was at 40% maybe in the beginning of the film, and Miles brings him up to like 85%. And it's just like, it's just not necessary. And then there's all these little things like having Spider-Gwen, which I just think is the dumbest character. Just the dumbest. Only surpassed by Gwenpool. Like, it's just how Gwen Stacy, who's dead in one of the greatest like Spider-Man, like the greatest comic book stories like ever, the death of Gwen Stacy, and how this character now all of a sudden is like two completely separate superheroes. It just illustrates the ludicrous state of Marvel comic books. But in regards to this movie, I had to just like cringe when she shows up, because it's like, of course, she's amazing. She's better than Spider-Man. She's better than Peter. Like, she's the best, of course. And it's just like, of course, like, of course she's the best. Even in Miles Morales' movie. And again, this is Miles Morales' movie. They do this clever thing about bringing these characters in, but it's because of this machine that Wilson Fisk is building, which I'm not going to say much more about that, but it nothing really matters in this movie. Everything is just a plot device. Now it's fun, it's entertaining to watch, but when you sit back and you think about it, it's very contrived. Everything is just here to make the characters go this other place and what have you. And so when all is said and done, what is there? Now, God, I'm just struggling. Speaking of Gwen Stacy, not only is she the best, I forgot this part. One of my issues with Marvel comic books, modern Marvel comic books, is that they've gotten away from heroism. They've completely lost sight of like what made comic books great to begin with, both DC and Marvel. And it's these heroic characters that kids could look up to. Modern Marvel Comics is about being a rock star in a figurative sense. It's like, it's the Kim Kardashian thing. It's just about being popular for the sake of being popular. It's about being famous and everyone knowing you and being cool and being a trendsetter. It's about look at me. It's the look at me generation, and the way the comic books are written are not now for you to read them and go, oh wow, that character is such a heroic character, and that they're like, wow, that character is badass. I want to be badass like that guy. I bet everyone loves him. Like, it's such a self-centered look at me attitude that persists, and Marvel Comics is the most egregious. It's invading a little bit of DC, but to stick back to the film, one of the things about Gwen Stacy she's literally a rock star. Like, not only do you have this figurative sense about how these characters are, but of course, not only is she a rock star in the sense I just described, but she's also an actual rock star. Like, it's like, come on, this is so stupid. And these characters really don't have flaws. I mean, the only problem that Miles has is that he doesn't know how to use his powers. There's really no other flaws. He's a super genius. Gwen Stacy's, of course, super genius. They go to the special school. His Miles' parents are perfect. Apparently, a police officer and an EMT can afford to live in Manhattan. And have their kid go to a special elite school. Don't know how that works, but whatever. There's no real issues with the character. Like Peter Parker started off being kind of a dipshit. I mean, he's always been really intelligent or whatever, but the whole story of why the whole great power comes great responsibility is because he let the criminal get away that killed Uncle Ben when he had the power to stop him. But he decided, it's not my bag. I don't need to do it. He was what the Marvel characters are today, and it got his Uncle Ben killed. So then he became what Marvel Comics characters used to be, something to look up to. This is a character that was flawed. He had to overcome these flaws. He also had social issues. So he was geeky and socially inept, and didn't know his way around people very well. These were things that a lot of us could relate to. We can't relate to Miles. The dude is super popular and hip. He's got the coolest parents. He's smart. Okay, I'm just thinking about this film. So Peter Parker teaches him, and by the end of the film, everything wraps up. Everyone goes back home, and it's just leaving Miles. And I'm like, this is a problem that I've always had with like the the Spider-Gwen and the Miles, all these other Spider characters. Like, one of the other fundamental things about Peter Parker is that the dude was a scientist. He's a chemist. He's a prodigy. And I'm playing through the Sony, the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game, which, oh my God, is epic. I have to scratch what I said. The third best Spider-Man movie is the Sony PlayStation video game. Wow. They are nailing that. Anyways, fantastic. They get Peter Parker down perfectly. The kid could have been a super, scientist type person. He went down a different path because of his heroism and things like that. But my point is, the spider webs, Spider-Man's spider webs are his own invention. He made those, and it's something that I like that they touched this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where like even Iron Man looks at it and goes, "Wow, this is amazing!" Like, even someone like Tony Stark couldn't understand how to make these spider webs. Now he's not a chemist; he's an engineer. But you know what I'm saying? Like, Peter has his own niche, and he's a prodigy of sorts when it comes to science, and he was able. That's one of the things that makes Spider-Man. He got bit by a radioactive spider, sure, yes, but he also had the wherewithal to make the spider webs and the other gadgets that Spider-Man uses from time to time. Spider-Gwen, Miles Morales, all these other characters, they don't have that, right? Now, so how do they recreate it? It's one of those things like, it doesn't matter. Like in the movie, Peter Parker gives Miles a web shooter. Okay, so he's got one web shooter that Peter gave him. Tell that okay, I'm rambling about nonsense here. Let's focus on the positive for a sec. Like, the film is fun. I want to give credit where credit's due. It is fun. It is entertaining. I went with my buddy and his 2 kids. They both loved it. They loved it better than Aquaman, which I liked Aquaman better. I guess another frame of reference. They liked it better. They had a blast. And I really enjoyed it too. It's one of those things that it's so good at what it does that it overcomes its flaws. So even though I'm sitting in the theater, it was a really weird experience for me, because I'm sitting in the theater and there's parts of me going, it's like, wow, this is so fun and so good, and then there's other parts of me going like, oh, groan, why are they doing this? And like, I go, why are you telling the story like this? For example, they're all running around in Miles Morales' world, right? It's the Ultimate Universe, I guess, so is what I'll call it. And they decide, for some reason that I'm not going to reveal, but to go to Aunt May's house. Now, Aunt May, the Peter Parker, they call him Peter B. Parker. Peter B. Parker's Aunt May is dead. So he's like, oh, I don't know if I can handle doing this, like seeing Aunt May again or whatever. Anyways, they go. And they knock on the door, and she shows up, and it's like, oh, Aunt May. And he's like, has a conversation. But then it's like, wait a second, this isn't Aunt May. Well, it is, but it's not the Aunt May that we're used to. This is an Aunt May who knows all of Peter Parker's secrets. This is an Aunt May who, I guess, the dead Peter Parker in this world, like, had his own spider cave, like, with all these amazing gadgets and a secret lair, and she's got the keys to it. And there's later on the villains come and fight, and she's like fighting us. I'm like, what kind of Aunt May? What? I was shaking my head, and I was like, if I didn't know anything about Spider-Man, I just came into this blind. I was like, I don't know who any of these characters are. I had to admit to myself, I probably wouldn't care if this was just like random animated film of characters. I'd be like, okay, that's the crazy old lady that's kicked, like, but it's not. It's Aunt May. So I'm of two worlds here. I'm like, I'm fighting this urge to be like, admit and say, yep, this is fine in a vacuum, but then also like hold back and go, but they're like really just messing up like everything that makes these characters to me that I grew up like. Why? Here's my point. Why stamp the Spider-Man logo if you don't want to actually do if you want to like tear Spider-Man up? Why? Just call him Spider-Dude. Like, make it something similar but different. This is my problem fundamentally with Miles Morales, and especially in this movie, because first of all, like I was talking about before, he's perfect. He's like a male version of a Mary Sue. That's not enough. They have to contrast him next to bozo loser Peter Parker to make him look even better. And this is a problem that I have. And even though, like I said, the film is not preachy, SJW-ish or whatever, it's it goes down this line of, man, I'm at a loss of thought. It goes down this line of a typical, what we see in progressive SJW storytelling, where they don't know how to build characters up, so they tear other characters down so that their characters can look good. We saw this when they did the female Thor, right? All of a sudden, it wasn't enough that they had to make Jane Foster Thor, and they couldn't really make her stand on her 2 feet, so they had to make other original, actual, real Thor the unworthy Thor. They had to turn him into a bum. They had to make him bad because they don't know how to make their characters good, and they do this all the time. When you see a other comparisons. I'm off the top of my head, I'm not seeing. I guess Hulk is one of them. You know, it's like. Anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent, but you know what I'm talking about. So I want to say about Spider-Man is definitely see it. I'm coming down a lot, and I think part of that is just because I'm seeing so many people be so hyperbolic about this film. This is not a bad film. I would not have a problem owning this film. It is very watchable. But you have to go in and realize, if you're at least coming from a frame of mind like me, that this is not going to be Spider-Man. This is going to be... This is this is whatever. This is, I guess maybe it is Spider-Man. If you've been reading, I haven't read Spider-Man in 20 years. So if your frame of reference is all modern, it's going to seem like, hey, this is great. But to me, it's not. To me, it's just a bunch of self-important people. Even Miles Morales, his whole motivation. He doesn't have a great power comes great responsibility. His motivation is Kingpin got one of my family members killed. I have to get him back. It's like a revenge. It's a vengeance story. Like there's nothing heroic about his character to me. He's cool and someone did him wrong, so he's going to use his power to stop him. All right. And then when all's said and done, he's going to be the rock star and everyone's going to love him. That's essentially that is the movie in a nutshell, right? Like there's a lot more to it to be entertained by, but if you want to know what the movie is, essentially that's what it's about. So when you walk away and you have time to reflect on the film, you're going to think, yeah, I guess there's not really much to it. It was a lot of bells and whistles, but empty inside. So again, like I know I'm sounding really negative, and parts of it really bother me, and that's very subjective. So keep that in mind. Other people aren't going to have the same. Obviously, they don't. I mean, it's got like a 97 audience score, and I think like same thing on critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. So I am in the minority when it comes to critiquing this film for sure. And were I a Rotten Tomatoes reviewer, I would give this a positive score, so that would contribute to its fresh rating. I do not think this is a bad film. In fact, I rate films on 5-star ratings with no half stars, so it's a 5-point system. 3 being the average, 4 being excellent, and 5 being, awesome. I give this a 4. It's definitely an excellent film, and it's worth your time. And this is something you do want to see in theaters. I don't know if there's a 3D version, but if there is, I would love to see it. So that might be something to be worth checking out. Thank you for sitting here listening to me blather on. Just wanted to talk about this film. It's comic book related, right? So hope you see it. If you have seen it, throw in your thoughts down below. I would love to hear it. I read everything that people type. If you have your own video that you've talked about on your own channel, plug it down below. I'll be happy to come by and check it out. I like to hear other thoughts. Like I said, this is more of a conversation than like an official review. It's just two people talking about, well, me talking to you about, what we liked or disliked about the film. So hopefully this format is agreeable to you, and love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening.